Today we got our first look at James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, both through a roll call teaser in which we figured out what announced cast members are playing which newly announced characters, and some behind-the-scenes footage of the Suicide Squad movie, with James Gunn talking about making the film and what sort of thought process went into making it. Now, as part of diving into this movie, let's begin with looking at the Suicide Squad members, or the members that make up Task Force X, as it's officially called. Starting off, we have 4 returning characters from David Ayer's Suicide Squad. We have the woman sort of behind all the operations, Amanda Waller, portrayed by Viola Davis. Colonel Rick Flag, the person who leads the Suicide Squad on the ground, played by Joel Kinnaman. And then as members of the Suicide Squad, we have Jai Courtney returning as Captain Boomerang, and Margot Robbie returning as Harley Quinn from both Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey. Now, the other cast members of David Ayer's Suicide Squad film will not be in this movie. Instead, we have an entirely new cast of characters, including John Cena as Peacemaker, Pete Davidson as Blackguard, Michael Rooker as Savant, Sean Gunn as Weasel, Idris Elba as Bloodsport, Peter Capaldi as The Thinker, David Dastmalchian as Polka Dot Man, Daniela Melchior as Ratcatcher 2, Flula Borg as Javelin, Nathan Fillion as TDK, Mei-Ling Ng as Mongol, Alice Braga as Solsoria, and finally we have King Shark, who was portrayed on set by Steve Agee. Don't entirely know how to pronounce his last name, but he provided the on-set motion capture for King Shark. We still don't know his voice actor, and I'll get into that later. Now, looking at this cast, there are a lot of interesting choices here, but I think as I was watching it, the first question I had was, who is TDK, played by Nathan Fillion? And through looking at some Twitter posts from a while ago, it looks like TDK is going to stand for the Detachable Kid. Now, what does this mean? It means Nathan Fillion is likely going to play the first live-action adaptation of Arm Fall Off Boy. Now, I assume James Gunn wanted it to be humorous to sort of have this build-up, not knowing who this character is, only for him to turn out to be Arm Fall Off Boy. But if you look at TDK standing for the Detachable Kid, and his logo resembling 2 detached arms, it seems pretty clear that he's going to be playing some sort of adaptation or spin on Arm Fall Off Boy. And then furthermore, the other thing that stood out is Ratcatcher 2. Now, this is likely because in the comics, Ratcatcher is a man. Now, what we're going to likely see is that man did exist in the DCEU, or whatever sort of cinematic universe they're going for now, and that this woman is the successor to that Ratcatcher, whether it be his daughter or just some random girl who took up the mantle. Now, finally, one of the other big questions on this cast is who is going to be King Shark, because Steve Agee played his motion capture, but they deliberately didn't attach any name to King Shark in the roll call, which has led to some theories that previously announced cast member Taika Waititi will be voicing King Shark. I think this could be a very clever way to sort of have a DC parallel to Taika Waititi playing Korg from the MCU. So I could see them using Taika Waititi as King Shark, with this giant, massive, monstrous beast of a character, and Taika Waititi's very humorous, sort of softer pitched voice. I think it would be a very funny contrast. However, I do think there's another potential role that Taika Waititi could have, but I'll get to that later. Now, when examining what we know about the film so far, we know that there's a lot of characters here. And we also know that during the behind-the-scenes clip, we were told, don't get too attached to anyone. So personally, in my opinion, I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot more deaths in this movie than David Ayer's Suicide Squad. I think the first character we're going to see die is most likely Solsoria, because looking into her character, there's a character in DC Comics named Juan Soria. Now, Juan Soria is likely going to be the inspiration for Soul Soria. I'm assuming she's going to be a gender-swapped version of Juan Soria. Now, looking at Juan's powers, His power is the ability to unlock anything. Sound familiar? I feel like Solsoria is going to be this movie's version of Slipknot, where they are deliberately introduced with a kind of lame power. You know, the man who can climb anything, the woman who can unlock anything, and is quickly killed off at the beginning of the movie. Now, there are some leaks and rumors that I don't want to get too into just because of how spoilery they are, but there is one that I will want to address later on. Now, furthermore, what we know about this movie is that it's likely going to be some sort of continuation from what we've seen before. We don't have the same cast members, but the Suicide Squad as a team is often fluid and shifting. So to me, it makes sense that we don't see all the same characters coming back. Early on in the process of this movie being produced, there were rumors that Idris Elba would be replacing Will Smith as Deadshot, but that turned out to not be the case. Instead, he's playing Bloodsport. Now, Idris Elba playing Bloodsport kind of took me by surprise. I thought he would be playing Bronze Tiger or Vigilante. However, Idris Elba playing Bloodsport actually plays into a sort of spoiler and a rumor that leaked out earlier today before the DC fandom event, actually yesterday at the time of recording, on August 21st. Now, the rumor comes from Splash Report. Specifically, what we heard from Splash Report from reporter Kelvin Chavez is that at a Las Vegas screening of The Suicide Squad, it was announced that Idris Elba would be playing Bloodsport. Now, this came before the DC fandom event, before anything leaked from fandom, and that sort of stood out of the crowd to me, because all the other speculation, theories, and rumors were that he would be playing Vigilante. So this sort of went against the grain. But as we saw at the fandom event, Idris Elba would indeed be playing Bloodsport. Now, the other thing this leak claimed from Splash Report, and this is a potential spoiler, so click away if you aren't interested in that, is that the main villain of the movie would be Starro the Conqueror. That's crazy, I know, to think that Starro the Conqueror would be a villain for the Suicide Squad. But given James Gunn's penchant for sort of picking these unique, weird characters like Polka Dot Man, Arm Fall Off Boy, or TDK, or Peacemaker, I think there's a very real chance James Gunn picked Starro the Conqueror to be the main villain. And furthermore, there are some images from the sneak peek that could sort of lend credence to this idea of background shots of people with something on their face, potentially being a starfish from Starro the Conqueror. Now, I think Taika Waititi could be voicing Starro the Conqueror. Again, I think it would be a very funny contrast to have this big menacing character voiced by Taika Waititi. So, I could see him playing King Shark, as previously mentioned, but I could also see him voicing Starro the Conqueror as the main villain for the film. Now, I think him as a villain could be a very interesting story. Based on what we've seen, we see the Suicide Squad in a sort of Latin American environment, sort of an island city and a beach. So what we could potentially see is Starro the Conqueror almost taking over an entire nation of people, and then the US government decides to send in Task Force X to go clean up and to try and, quell it before it gets to the American border. Now, I think that could be very smart because you could play into sort of the Black Ops covert operations aspect of Task Force X, deploying them to a foreign country without their permission. So I think you could play into that sort of aspect, whereas the original Suicide Squad movie, I don't think the task really lent itself to the Suicide Squad, but I feel like, funnily enough, somehow, Starro the Conqueror, in this context, could work very well as a villain for the Suicide Squad. So, we still don't know for certain who the villain is, but based on the leak, and based on the images from the behind the scenes, and based on the type of person James Gunn is, I wouldn't put it past this movie for the main villain to be Starro the Conqueror. So this is pretty much all we've known so far. We've known the cast for months now, but today we've really only got who they're playing and some very brief clips from the movie. We didn't get a full trailer, we didn't get much of a plot or a story, so I think we'll be finding out more as time goes on, but this was sort of a preview to what we may learn more about as time goes on. Let me know what you think about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Let me know who you want Taika Waititi to be voicing. Let me know what you think about the characters in the cast, and let me know what you think about a potential plot for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad in the comments down below. Leave a like and subscribe for more information about upcoming DC and Marvel Comics properties, whether it be video games, movies, TV, or comic series. And I'll see you guys next time.